Today I'm going to be going into a little bit about the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam and looking at his life and taking a few lessons and then taking those lessons and getting inspired by them and implementing into our own life, inshallah. Okay, so let's look at even when he was just a young boy. His father created these idols. Literally, this guy would take, like, I don't know, some materials, maybe some wood, maybe some clay, right? And he's like put together these things, and he could see with his own eyes. His father's, it's fabricated, right? It's like he's making himself, and he's like, yo, this doesn't make any sense. How can you like make something and then like worship it and pray to it? Humans, we have this need for sanctification. We always want to worship something. There's always something that we want to like, we're always in awe of greatness, right? Even like I can imagine like some great basketball players. You're like, yo, this guy's sick. Yo, this guy's the GOAT, right? We have that need to like worship things that are above us, right? Of course, this is in our fitrah. This is in our nature, right? Because we should submit to the only one worthy of worship, was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's a situation where for some reason the people had to leave. He was left behind, and he took this opportunity he got angry, and he was talking to the idols. He's like, answer me. Like, he was asking them questions. Oh, why won't you talk? Right? And he took a hammer and he just started smashing the idols, right? Because he realized these are false, right? And then he put the hammer in the biggest one, and people came back, and they're like, why'd you do this, right? And he's like, can the idol like talk back to you? Can it see? Like, wouldn't it have been able to protect itself, right? Things like that. It doesn't make any sense. In Islam, we heavily talk about like, no, don't worship the idols. Don't worship the things that we shouldn't, that are false, right? These false idols. But let's take it in today's context. Yes, people do idol worship today. The girls with their crystals and stuff, they're doing like witch stuff. You know what I mean? You guys seen that? Okay. But on a real note, I think, we're a bit educated in terms of, and we know to stay away from this. And here's the thing about shaitan. Shaitan is sneaky. Shaitan knows that you know that. Like, shaitan knows that, oh, this guy's not going to just be an atheist. Like, this guy's not just going to renounce God like this. This guy's not just going to go and pray, like, sujood to an idol, right? So what does he do? He looks for a different angle. He's like, yo, I can't get him this way, but maybe with something smaller, and I can ease him into it and then hook him, right? And then he's like freaking sinning, and he's like, yeah, I'm winning, right? So something like, especially growing up in the West, we're actually surrounded by a different culture, right? That's why I imagine some of you guys, when you do try to speak about Islam to non-Muslim friends, sometimes it's like difficult to relate because it's such a different way of life. You guys feel like that? Such a different way of being, right? So these ideologies, they're in movies, our music, our culture, our workplaces, everywhere. We're surrounded by it, right? It's secular, right? Keep your spiritual practices here in this little corner. You go to your masjid, do that at home, whatever. Or if you're praying at work, we'll allow it, go into a room, do it, no problem. It doesn't harm anybody, right? Because that's what matters. As long as you don't harm anybody, everything's all good, right? As long as you don't physically harm anybody, do whatever you want. Do drugs, it's legal, no problem, right? And there's no really morality to base that off of, right? So that's why we need to be protective of taking other laws as our ilah, right? Like submitting to other things, because when you actually look at la ilaha illallah, what do you do when you're saying the shahada? You're saying there is no God. So you're actually committing kufr. You're saying there's no God worthy of worship except Allah. So what's that first step? It's actually renouncing all the BS and the false stuff and all those things that we shouldn't be worshiping and following. And it's subtle. So really do an audit for yourself. You know, am I subscribing to feminist ideology? Am I, you know, following like capitalist? Are these thoughts of mine? Because what we really want to build is desecularized Muslims and actual critical thinkers, and actually having an Islamic way of thinking. Because think about it, if you have an Islamic way of thinking through your life, you're gonna be so much better, right? Because you know how to think like a Muslim, right? So you're not gonna fall into the same trouble. You're not gonna fall into sin because you have these sort of guardrails that you know. Okay, I shouldn't pass here, or I don't know what to do in this situation. Okay, let me, you know, do the correct intention. All this stuff. Okay. So going back to the story of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, he was thrown in the fire, right? They're like, yo, who's this guy? Let's burn him, right? Because he's trying to call towards something other than that's going on right now. He's a disruptor, right? He's trying to make a change, trying to make it like an activist, right? A messenger, right? Trying to take control of remove the current political power because it was oppressive, right? And that story, of course, he was going to be thrown in the fire, but we know what happened, right? It became cool, and that shows the kind of the trickery of this world, right? Because on one hand, something seems like so nice and so good, or maybe it seems, something seems like bad and hard, right? But in reality, it's the other way around, right? We think that, doing all this stuff, doing harder, it's harder, Islam is harder, all these responsibilities, right? But can we actually look at the true beauty and actually go past these? People make just like really weak arguments, right? Are we able to look past that Islamic way of thinking, right? Actually be like, see things for what it is. Okay, and finally, I'm going to end off with the story of sacrifice, right? And how he had to leave his family in the desert, right? Imagine that. Like, you have a family, you just got married. He just got married actually recently before that happened, right? To Hajar, and Allah said, go to the desert. First he was like, he thought it was, he was like, no, this can't be it. This can't be it. But then once he understood that was from Allah, he didn't hesitate, right? And he went to the desert, and he left his wife and kids there, and she's like, why are you leaving us here? And he couldn't even answer, right? And then she realized it was from Allah, and she's like, if this is from Allah, then I will stay, right? And there's no water, and she was running back and forth to Safa, Marwa, Safa, Marwa, Safa, Marwa. What does that mean? She wasn't just sitting there like, oh Allah, please help me. Of course she called to Allah and made dua, right? But that isn't it. You don't leave it there, right? She's actually striving. She's looking. She's going on the hill because it's a high place, so she can actually see, is there anyone else? Is there some plants? Like, can I get some sort of resources, right? So we got to be doing the same thing in our life, right? Because if we actually want to establish the deen, we want to practice Islam. Like I mentioned, you actually want a state of Islam in our countries back home. How are we actually going to work towards that? Well, we need people striving in many different industries, in law, PR, right? We need people in political power. We need strong business owners and entrepreneurs. We need people in the media space, right? Right, to influence everybody, right? We need people in the finance space. Think about it, right? So how can you actually be that carrier? And that's what I'm going to leave off on. Like, what are you going to do for the ummah? What are you going to do to empower, strengthen? How can you, are you teaching young kids and helping them level up, right? And I want you guys to have a mission of, one, like desecularizing your own mind, right? Which is something very, very important, right? that we should be doing and building that Islamic way of thinking, and then also helping others do that as well. Because that is the first step right now. That is the first step that's actually going to get us, inshallah, to actually practicing Islam the way that Allah has meant us to do it, right? In all aspects, not just the spiritual, but in the financial, the health, right? The political, right? The way that you govern your country, inshallah. All right? So I'll leave you with that. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.